One of the world's most famous gorillas has died. Koko was known for her ability to sign. She was born at the San Francisco Zoo in 1971. Her full name is Hanabiko, Japanese for fireworks child.
Welcome to the Kongversation, and welcome to Banjo-Kazooie's 20th anniversary. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Jeff Onan. I'm the other guy.
Jeff! Yes, Jeffy. I should be Hiley, you should be Jeffy to keep with the...
Hyle Kajeffy.
Yes, there we go. Hyle-O. Jeff.
Well, I should be Jeffo because I'm Jeff Onan, so Jeffo Kahiley.
Kahiley, okay. That's awful. Let's not do that.
That's the last time we'll ever say that.
Although I would love to curl up in the fetal position and sleep in a backpack for a while. That's usually the condition I find myself after doing one of these podcasts. Jeff, it's Banjo-Kazooie's 20th anniversary, and I really feel like we've already been here, and that's only because, for some reason, DK Vine really celebrated Banjo-Kazooie's 15th anniversary, and we had the full site makeover, we had the Spotlight episode of the Kongversation. That was way back in Kongversation Season 1. We did the Spotlight for the original Banjo-Kazooie, and we gave it all this coverage, and I think it was because the staff really talked Chad and I into celebrating the 15th anniversaries, because at the time the 20th anniversary seemed so inconceivably far away that it was 15th anniversary, sure. So we did that for Diddy Kong Racing, we did that for Banjo-Kazooie, and then we hit the 20th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country, and all of a sudden it was we're in the 20th anniversaries now, forget the 15th anniversaries. So alas, we are not going to be giving Grab by the Ghoulies the full 15th anniversary treatment it deserves this fall. But nonetheless, we're here at the 20th of Banjo-Kazooie. And as I said, we already did the Spotlight episode for Banjo-Kazooie. It was a 2-part Spotlight way back in Season 1, so feel free to listen to that. So I was kind of faced with a dilemma. How does the Kongversation acknowledge Banjo-Kazooie's 20th when we've already done what we've been doing for the 20th anniversary for most of these titles? And I wanted to do something a little different. I don't know if it's going to be fully successful or not, but I wanted to do something a little bit more low-key, a little bit less comprehensive about, oh, and then you went into this world and you saw this character. I really like where that Jiggy was placed. And I wanted to do something a little bit broader than that and really get into legacy and why a game like Banjo-Kazooie still resonates to this day. And if this goes well, we might do this for, say, the 25th anniversary of the DKC games and whatnot. But Jeff, thank you for being here, and let's talk about, Banjo-Kazooie, I think, is one of those titles in what DK Vine covers, the Donkey Kong Universe Pantheon, that is probably the most beloved. Honestly, it might be the most beloved when you really look at what our readers and listeners and viewers respond to. You can't go wrong with Banjo-Kazooie. I think it's something that's... It saw a dip in popularity in the 2000s, in the aughts, in the noughties, but it has really come surging back in the last few years. And I really am kind of intrigued by this phenomenon because Banjo-Kazooie was kind of written off as this more-bound franchise, this outdated mode of gaming, and now it's just... It's kind of everywhere. It's on everybody's lips. Not just Banjo-Kazooie, but the influence of Banjo-Kazooie. And so I thought we could talk a little bit about what Banjo-Kazooie means to us. but also what Banjo-Kazooie means to the gaming industry as a whole. And then we're going to be hearing from quite a few of our listeners and to hear what Banjo-Kazooie means to them and ultimately why Banjo-Kazooie still matters today. Woo,
all right,
okay,
let's do it.
So, yeah. Well, Jeff, real quick, let's get into a little bit about our own personal, I don't know, feelings towards Banjo. So, you know, and I got into a lot of this in the Spotlight episodes. So, and of course in the intervening 5 seasons of the Kongversation after that. So I don't really need to get too deep in these waters. Not without my green wading boots, but. Banjo-Kazooie, when it was announced in 1997, I was originally disheartened. It was E3 97, or I should clarify, it was the magazine coverage of E3 97, because this was still 1 year out before I was really online in any like full-time capacity. So I relied on E3 coverage through Nintendo Power, you know? So it was always like a month after E3, you would get your E3 coverage. So, I mean, it still kind of corresponded with where E3 is today, because I think E3 was back in May, in those early days, and so you would get your E3 coverage sometime in June. So, they announced Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Quest at E3 97, and of course, I was a Donkey Kong fanatic. I was all about the Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Land games, and I fully expected E3 97. You know, we just got DKC 3, so I thought, okay, E3 97, Rare's going to announce Donkey Kong World, Donkey Kong Universe, whatever it's called for the N64.
You were the original, like, should have been Metroid type of guy.
No, I'm the original. Why is Rare making Sea of Thieves when they could be making Banjo-Kazooie? Yeah. I mean, I was doing that to Banjo-Kazooie as a Donkey Kong fanatic. So, I was still intrigued by it, obviously. You know, I was intrigued by anything Rare did at that point. But it wasn't my series. And I was a bit worried that Rare was moving away from Donkey Kong. It almost felt like a little bit of a betrayal. But, you know, DKC3 did introduce bears, as you're well acquainted with, Mr. Brash Lover, Jeff the Brash. So, yeah, here's this bear protagonist. He looked like he could be, you know, from the same world as Donkey Kong Country 3. He was a different kind of bear, obviously. His claws were different. He didn't have fur on his hands. But, by and large, he looked like he could be, you know, just down the road from the Brothers Bear. So, you know, I was like, okay, maybe there's some connection to Donkey Kong here. I wouldn't put it past Rare to sneak a Donkey Kong character in there or something. Of course, Banjo-Kazooie was ultimately delayed, and we got Diddy Kong Racing in its stead, and of course, Diddy Kong Racing introduced Banjo and Conker, so the whole point was moot. Banjo was therefore a Diddy Kong Racing character, and Banjo-Kazooie could then be viewed as a Donkey Kong Country spinoff. So everything was harmonious in the land of Hyle. But, 1998, summer of 1998, we just put this up on our YouTube channel this morning. We're recording this on the day of the actual anniversary, Friday, June 29th. And I just put it up on the YouTube channel this morning of the famous VHS promotional mailer that Nintendo of America and, ironically, Toys R Us released with John Lovitz narrating it. And I say ironic because Toys R Us is closing its final stores today, June 29th, 2018. So it's kind of eerie that they released this tape that was driving people into their stores on June 29th, 1998. 20 years to the day they would die.
Yeah.
But,
it's the curse
I blame
of
John
Lovitz.
Lovitz.
Finally come home to roost.
You know, there's this saying that some political analysts are using that everything Trump touches dies, meaning everybody who gets associated or entangled with Donald Trump finds their dignity and credibility just ultimately in ruins while Donald Trump gets off scot-free. So, maybe everything John Lovitz touches also dies. He joined news radio after Phil Hartman's death in the fall of 1998. Canceled.
The difference here is I don't think anyone would say that John Lovitz continues to thrive.
Oh, well, that's the weird thing about this VHS tape. That's the weird thing. John Lovitz still had a career. I mean, John Lovitz still has more of a career than I do, so I'm not shit-talking John Lovitz just to make myself feel good here. But John Lovitz, this was like the late 90s. John Lovitz was still a commodity. I mean, he wasn't like A-list or B-list or C-list, but he was well known. I mean, news radio snatched him up when Phil Hartman died. It was like, well, let's get Lovitz. So, I mean, Lovitz still had Hollywood power. So the fact that he did this VHS mailer, and I immediately, being a guy who, or not a guy at the time, I was just a young teenager on the younger side of the teenage years. I was still somebody who was up on pop culture. I watched The Critic when that was on TV. You know, I knew who John Lovitz was, and I immediately recognized that nasally, whiny voice telling me about Banjo-Kazooie, and it was just kind of this very, very credibility boosting moment where it was just like, holy shit, John Lovitz is talking about this game I'm already hyped for. Like, this is the real deal. Banjo-Kazooie is the second coming of Jesus. And what I really liked about that VHS mailer, too, was it really did make it feel like a piece of the Donkey Kong universe. The nascent Donkey Kong universe that was just kind of being built up at this time. Because the VHS starts off with John Lovitz saying, first, there was Donkey and Diddy Kong, then Diddy and Dixie, Dixie and Kitty. And then he says Mario and Yoshi, which never really works. And then he says, but he segues that into, you know, and now here's the newest duo, Banjo-Kazooie. And at the end of the VHS tape, he says, the best new game since Donkey teamed up with Diddy. And it was just like, okay, yeah, this is all part of the same world. Yeah, John Lovitz. So, yeah, anyway, I'll always be a John Lovitz fan primarily because of this fucking VHS tape. But it got me hyped for it, and I think the thing I loved about Banjo-Kazooie was, unlike most other big releases of this era, and still any era, is that it came out in June. Late June. It was a summer game. You know, video games, there's always those big November releases to tie in with the post-Thanksgiving, U.S. Thanksgiving, and holiday sales rush. So that was how we got Donkey Kong Country, the entire trilogy. That's how we got Banjo-Kazooie. But to have this big, big game come out in June, it felt like the summer of 1998 was defined. If you were a kid who played the N64, it was defined by Banjo-Kazooie. And that really did feel like part of the game. I mean, the whole atmosphere, the whole environment of the game, of course, it varied world by world, but the protagonist was this country bumpkin of a honey bear, paired up with a sarcastic bird lady. But Banjo himself, like the whole, there was this country-like theme to the game, like this rural kind of mountains. I mean, Spiral Mountain. Like you train in a vegetable field, like
right.
whacking,
and then you go right into Mumbo's
carrots
Mountain
and cauliflowers. What? Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, there's different themes to each world, obviously, but the whole, like, when you think of Banjo-Kazooie, you think of like the sprawling country fields and Spiral Mountain, and like when you think of Donkey Kong, you think of the jungle. Right. Well,
and for me, Donkey Kong Country 3 has that feeling, because I didn't play Donkey Kong Country 3 until one summer. I didn't know there was a third one, and I went to visit some family friends at their summer cottage. And in their summer cottage, they had a Super Nintendo. They had Donkey Kong Country 3. And I was blown away, because Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2 are my favorites, like favorite games of any games. And I didn't know they had a third one. And so Donkey Kong Country 3 is this world full of water and ducks and anyway, I think just like Banjo-Kazooie, it kind of serves that like summer, open field, water, all this like kind of vibe. And with Banjo-Kazooie specifically, I think one of the first moments in that game that blew me away was walking into the tall grass in Spiral Mountain and watching Banjo's waist disappear into the polygons of the tall grass. That just, that was one of the earliest moments I have of remembering something in a video game making me think, wow, that is an impressive technical feat. And I was 5 years old when Banjo-Kazooie came out, but I was probably a little older when I first experienced it, maybe 6. But
you were a man of the world. You were a seasoned man of the world by the time you experienced it.
It was like, whoa, this is new technology, 3D gaming. I had seen some 3D gaming, but Banjo-Kazooie, watching him walk through the tall grass, I really felt like, wow, this game is going to be something different. This is a step up. This is something beyond what's been capable before in like Super Mario 64. In terms of, this is a real world. Like, this is the technological achievement of creating a world to play around in. And I remember being blown away by that.
Yeah, it's amazing. As somebody who got the N64 in early 1997, but had rented it beforehand, had played Super Mario 64, the fall it came out, and I was blown away by Super Mario 64 and was jealous of Super Mario 64 that all of a sudden, like, the bloom was off the rose of Donkey Kong Country. Like, yeah, we were getting a new Donkey Kong Country game, but everybody was looking at Super Mario 64. That was all of a sudden the big evolution, the revolution in Nintendo gaming at that point. So I was jealous as hell of Super Mario 64, but I had to admit in the deepest, darkest recesses of my brain, like, this is amazing. But when Banjo-Kazooie came out, it was a year and a half, almost 2 years, I guess, since 2 years if you're counting the Japanese releases, of course. 2 years since Super Mario 64 came out, but it felt like 5 years between it because Banjo-Kazooie, it felt so far above Super Mario 64's league. It felt like such a jump forward that it should have been on the next system. That's how big of a gulf it felt like there was. It felt like Super Mario 64 was the original Super Mario Brothers. It felt like Banjo-Kazooie was Super Mario World. And it was on the same system, just 2 years removed. And, playing it in late June, I got it June 29th when it came out, but I didn't really start playing it fully until I went over to my friend Elliot's house the next morning on June 30th, and we just, like, tore into Banjo-Kazooie. And I remember, like, running around Spiral Mountain, and, those memories stick with me. Just how real and actualized Spiral Mountain felt. And it's funny, I love the environments that Rare creates. There's something so appealing to me about Donkey Kong's home, Donkey Kong Island, the Congo jungle. It appeals to something in me that boyish sense of adventure, of discovering, like, primitive, untamed jungle environments. But and Sea of Thieves as well. I love the whole swashbuckling, sailing from island to island. But if I'm being honest with myself, like, I think as I get older, the more I realize, like, I just love mountains. I love the countryside. I'm never going to be this guy who strives to be an urbane sophisticant living in, Manhattan or whatever. I want, like, a mountain stream next to me to really feel content. And so I love Banjo-Kazooie's homeworld, the base of where the Banjo-Kazooie world orbits. Or the Banjo-Kazooie, I guess, solar system orbits. The sun of Banjo-Kazooie is Spiral Mountain, and I love it. And I love the environment and just the feeling and the general tone of Banjo-Kazooie. I think Banjo-Kazooie is probably the closest to my personality out of all of the Donkey Kong Universe series. Donkey Kong, especially post-Rare, Donkey Kong can be pretty straight-laced at times. It still has that impish sense of humor, but, you know, it's a little bit more straight-laced. Conquer is too far in the extreme. It's almost South Park humor. Banjo-Kazooie is kind of who I am, kind of my sense of humor, my worldview. It's pretty much nails who Hyle Russell is circa 2018. So yeah, I love Banjo-Kazooie, and I love this franchise as a whole. And we're gonna be getting into a little bit about why that kind of matters and why that makes Banjo-Kazooie still matter to this day. But Jeff, like, tell me a little bit more about how Banjo-Kazooie resonates with you.
So,
to this day,
for context, and I've been on a lot of podcasts over the years and told these stories at different times, so I don't know what's been repeated. But for the audience's sake, context given, I didn't own an N64 until well beyond the years of the N64. I lived in a PlayStation household at that time because my older brother was 6 years older than me, and he kind of was in charge of what we had he actually bought the PlayStation with his own money. And as a result, I played PlayStation games. I had loved the Super Nintendo and the NES, and then PlayStation came along and I played that. But my sister, who didn't live with us, she was even older, and had her own kids, her household had an N64, and I spent about 50% of my childhood at home and the other 50% at her house. So I played the N64 considerably at the time. They didn't own Banjo-Kazooie at first either. The first I got to play Banjo-Kazooie was a rental from, I think, Blockbuster. And before that, I think the only N64 games I the only N64 game I had played before Banjo-Kazooie was Super Smash Brothers. And Super Smash Brothers, it has 3D models, but it is restricted to a two-dimensional plane. So Banjo-Kazooie is the first N64 game I played that was really a three-dimensional game. And I had played PlayStation games before that, but I think Banjo-Kazooie really raised the bar in my mind as a kid of what games could look like, what games what kind of worlds could be created within the games. And I was blown away even then about it. And but when I really got to sit down and play it for a long time, but when I finally had a chance to own it and play it, to this day I still consider it basically the benchmark of the genre. At the same time that Banjo-Kazooie was out, I was playing the Crash Bandicoot trilogy. I was huge. I'm still a huge fan of the Crash Bandicoot trilogy, but the Crash Bandicoot trilogy are kind of like an evolution of Donkey Kong Country. They take the gameplay of you start at the beginning of the level, you progress to the end of a level in relatively a straight line, but they took it into a three-dimensional space. And it's focused around precision platforming instead of, exploration, so to speak. There is some exploration, but Banjo-Kazooie is a completely different 3D platformer than that. And so when I was playing Crash Bandicoot, I wasn't thinking like, wow, this completely changes everything. This is a new type of game. I was just thinking, oh, Crash Bandicoot, this is just like a new type of Donkey Kong Country. It's just as good. Banjo-Kazooie is something different. It's an evolution. And I think that where people who prefer Super Mario 64 to Banjo-Kazooie, those people do exist. I think the difference comes in the big innovation that Banjo-Kazooie provides that makes it a different thing is that Super Mario 64 is still at its heart beholden to the 2D platformers that Mario comes from. Super Mario 64 is built on those foundation. It still has a sort of every star that you collect is a singular challenge from start to finish. There's a lot of precision platforming involved there. Banjo-Kazooie presents all of the challenges to you at once in each world. It says, here's every challenge, and go find them. And it's not really about that precision platforming. It's about exploring the world, finding out where things are, and then you kind of get a clue as to how this might interact with that other thing, and you find characters and things to interact with. And it's, I think that innovation is, it's undersold how big Banjo-Kazooie's gameplay loop and basic spirit is still alive today in gaming. I think people talk about Banjo-Kazooie as an outdated game. They talk about, in 2018, we don't want to go on these fetch quests, and we don't want to, collect item A and take it to location B and do this and that, and all of the trotting and retreading steps. They talk about how outdated that gameplay is. But what Banjo-Kazooie's innovation is creating a sandbox world to move around in. And that is something Super Mario 64 doesn't do. It doesn't try to do. It's not the goal of Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 tries to create these challenges that you complete in a 3D space. Banjo-Kazooie tries to create a world to explore in a 3D space. And people say platformers, especially 3D platformers, died out for a long time. They didn't. They really didn't. They evolved into the open world sandbox genre, which is massive for the past 20 years. Grand Theft Auto, Assassin's Creed, basically every video game that wasn't a first-person shooter for the past 20 years was an open-world sandbox game that they set about creating a world to explore in and complete challenges in. And all of that is based on the foundation of Banjo-Kazooie. It's not based on Super Mario 64.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. And there's a fantastic article that went up about a week ago on the website The Ringer, where they actually interviewed Greg Mayles about Banjo's development and Banjo's legacy. And the consensus was something I think that a lot of people started coming around to when Super Mario Odyssey came out last fall, and that's Banjo-Kazooie might be more responsible for the current 3D platformer resurgence than anything Super Mario 64 did, besides basically creating the genre in the first place. Like you said, the rationale that Super Mario 64 actually had one foot in the past. It was saying, how can we translate Mario's type gameplay to another dimension of gameplay? And what they did was they structured it like past Mario games, where a lot of it was based on twitchy precision platforming. I'm specifically thinking, the world in the clouds, where you had to jump from platform to platform at the very end of the game. And I mean, that was Mario 64's gameplay. What everything was building up to was that type of challenge. And yeah, Greg Mayles specifically says, how much he loved Super Mario 64, but the one sticking point he had with it was that you went into a world, you got a power star, you got booted out of the world, and then things reset for your next challenge. And he felt like that just completely destroyed the immersion he felt in the game prior to that. And that Super Mario 64 was kind of underselling its biggest draw, which was exploring in a three-dimensional realm. Being able to go anywhere, potentially anywhere, trying to reach places that were just out of reach. That was why people went gaga over Super Mario 64. It wasn't because of the challenges or being able to jump from platform to platform. That was kind of a hindrance to what people really, really got off about Super Mario 64. And Greg Mayles and team realized that when they set out to recreate Dream. For more on Project Dream, see our Season 4 premiere, where we go into depth about Project Dream. But This is more about Banjo-Kazooie, the finished product. What Greg Mail set out to do was actually create a game where exploration was first and foremost the priority, and any platforming was a secondary combination to that. And it's not something that really dawned on me when I played Banjo-Kazooie way back in 98. I felt it for sure, and it was one of the reasons I absolutely fell head over heels with the game, but I never really considered that aspect and how different it was from Super Mario 64. Everybody was going on about the similarities between Banjo and Super Mario 64 and the small things that Banjo did better. Well, Banjo's got better graphics, it's got bigger worlds, it's got a better camera, because back then the camera was everything, man. Does your 3D platformer have a good camera? Like, how do the camera angles work? Like, stuff you don't even think about this day, because we've gotten past that. But that was one of the biggest hurdles to jump, making a leap from 2D to 3D was, well, how does the camera follow your character? So that was what people were focused on. They loved, like, the music, specifically the way the music would shift depending on where you are in the world. You go underwater, the music becomes muffled. You go up high, the music becomes faint or non-existent. Like, that shit blew people's minds, but they weren't looking at the bigger picture. I wasn't looking at the bigger picture. I don't think anybody was really looking at the bigger picture and how Banjo-Kazooie would necessarily influence gaming from that point on. It was more about, what does it do different than Super Mario 64, but it wasn't, how is it fundamentally different from Super Mario 64, and how is that important for the future of gaming?
Definitely, and I think... I think that's where people who prefer Super Mario 64 can still say that, and I don't think they're crazy. Because Banjo-Kazooie is not just a better version of Super Mario 64. It is a fundamentally different game. And there are people who prefer that precision platforming micro challenges, and that's great. Those people have had a lot of sequels in the Mario franchise to keep playing. But yeah, that's where you can get a difference of opinion, which is better. It's based on the fact that they're fundamentally very different approaches to the goal of the game and the primary way you interact with the world in the game.
Yeah, the Greg Mail's design philosophy, I go on and on about my fandom for Greg Mail's, and ordinarily I would say I'm not going to bore you, or he's a very modest man, he's a very humble man, so I almost feel bad, like, lavishing so much praise on him, but it's the Banjo-Kazooie 20th anniversary, fuck it, you gotta do it. So, I say Greg Mail's is the Western Miyamoto, and one of the reasons I say that is Greg Mail's has just like Miyamoto has his design philosophies. His design philosophies are really about, like, surprising the gamer and imagining, almost like a child, how the world could operate. Like, there could be a hidden world beyond that door. There's the infamous Miyamoto quote that was very, very flowery, and we made fun of it back in the day, but I fundamentally understand where he's coming from. Just about, like, just imagine, like, the worlds within worlds, imagining what fantastic surprises could be right around the corner. Greg Mail's is a lot more, though, rooted in celebrating the world as is and mining the beauty and emotion out of the world. And he specifically points out in this article, in this interview, that Banjo is more grounded in realism than Mario, and it really does make the world feel like it could plausibly exist. Yes, it's a cartoon world full of talking animals, obviously, but there is something deeply immersive about that world, and part of that is the way Banjo-Kazooie is structured. They're not, like, slapping your wrist and pulling you out of the world every time you get a Jiggy. And, if anything, to a fault, Banjo-Kazooie keeps you in those worlds, because you don't want to lose your notes. You don't want to lose your note progress in the original Banjo-Kazooie on the N64. So you've got to stay in that world, clinging to it desperately. And there's obviously still a lot of, like, early video game philosophies in Banjo-Kazooie where you've got to punish the gamer a little bit if they die. And that's something we've really gotten far away from. There really is no consequence anymore for continually dying, but there still was back then. And so I think the whole, you lose your notes when you die or when you exit the world, that was still part and parcel of that kind of idea where there's got to be some consequence to this whole life structure. But you could even see Banjo-Kazooie was slowly getting away from that. And by the time Banjo-Tooie rolled around, they just dispensed with the notion of lives to begin with and the whole game over thing.
And I think that speaking to the immersion angle of it, it really makes Super Mario 64's challenges feel artificial, because when you're done with the challenge, the whole world rearranges like a set. And then you jump back in.
Yes.
Whereas the way I think of Banjo's challenges is that they're not set up for you in like an artificial feeling kind of sense. They're just there. Like, this is just a world you stumble into that happens to have a bunch of stuff in it you need to get. You got to get them jiggies, or else you won't be able to, save your sister. And so this is just a world that has jiggies in it. And to get them, you got to go jump through some hoops. You got to talk to this guy, give him a bagel or whatever. And it felt like it's just a world you're stumbling into and going and exploring it and getting the stuff you need to progress. It doesn't feel like a challenge artificially set up for you. Obviously, it is a very meaningful like orchestration to the challenges, but they're all there. They're all just something you can find at your own leisure. You can do them out of order. You can, you go over to the left, go to the right, wherever you want to go first. You're finding Jinjos along the way until you've got all the Jinjos. And it all just felt like this is just a world that you're stumbling into. And that is just a huge difference, just that one gameplay change of, do we build a world around 10 simultaneous challenges, or do we build a world and then, just set up one challenge at a time? It's a monumental difference.
In Super Mario 64's defense, and Greg Mayles actually points this out, I'm sure it was easier to develop the game around the whole one challenge at a time notion, especially when you're basically creating a genre on your back. That was probably the easier way to go about it. And they had the benefit of already having Super Mario 64 as a template and seeing where they could push things a little bit further. So, I'm done slagging Super Mario 64 in defense of Banjo. I don't think it's necessary anymore. A lot of that Super Mario 64 as a glorified tech demo stuff was tongue-in-cheek back in the day on DK Vine. A lot of it, though, was just being very defensive because it was during an era where the legacy and importance of Banjo-Kazooie was being diminished and almost being ridiculed, and Super Mario 64 was considered this untouchable thing. And I feel like we're past that. We're past that as a community, but the gaming industry and the gaming media is past that, because what you've seen happen is fans of that era, fans of Rare, have now gotten into the industry, have now gotten into media, and even sites like DK Vine have a greater voice than we did back then. So I'm not going to slag off on Super Mario 64. It still pisses me off that the castle wasn't finished when we finally got up there. The biggest, this stop and swap of Super Mario 64 was getting up to that fucking castle and seeing what was up there. And that was still disappointing. But other than that, I'm done kind of trying to tear down one game to build up another. But you're right. And the thing I really love about the Banjo-Kazooie philosophy is you can see cause and effect as it happens. Super Mario 64 would pull you out of the game and things would change in the world, and sometimes your actions have consequences, but you don't really see how things got from point A to point B or point C even. Where in the worlds of Banjo-Kazooie, they can change in front of your eyes, and a lot of that change has to do with how you've benefited or hindered the lives of these characters you're interacting with. So it really did feel like this living, breathing, changing world that has a long history before you got there, will have a long history after you leave, but you really feel like you've made your mark, you being Banjo-Kazooie, have made your mark on this world and in the lives of these characters. And that in turn really makes you not only more invested in the game, but more invested in the series as a whole. And I think one of the reasons people have remained such steadfast Banjo fans is that connection to the world. We can talk about lore and immersion and really getting into just the fiction of the world. That's something DK Vine has always been heavy into. But I think too often than not, in the past, Nintendo themselves have discounted that. And they've always been more gameplay oriented, gameplay first. Let's strip it down to the essentials and have the most fun experience. With the exception of things like Zelda, and Zelda, I think, got there as one of the Nintendo franchises first, realizing that fans were really caring about the legend and lore of the game series. But now you look at Nintendo in 2018, you bring up Splatoon all the time, and you really sense a shift in philosophy, not everywhere in Nintendo, but especially among the younger teams, the younger devs, the younger creative talents at Nintendo. They really are developing things with a more classic Rare mindset.
Right. I think that there is definitely a difference between the old guard and the young guard. And an example being like, when Miyamoto looks at, Paper Mario and says to the guys, hey, you guys are kind of spinning your wheels here. What if you made a Paper Mario game where it didn't have any new characters and didn't have much of a big epic story? And, to me, that sentence coming out of a person's mouth just doesn't make any sense. But obviously Miyamoto is an incredible game designer. He knows what he's talking about. Like, there's no question behind that. And he's heavily respected in Nintendo. Basically, if he throws out just a sentence of an idea about your game, you will retool your entire game based on what he suggested, because it's
basically a commandment from
exactly.
Moses.
But when you see there is a big difference between the games that he chooses to involve himself in, and then some of the games that he doesn't touch, and the directions they take, and it's a culture difference. There's a huge difference in there, and yeah, we're seeing a big change in that coming with like I said, Splatoon, but even ARMS. ARMS is another big new IP that really has a lot of character in it, has a lot of lore in it, backstory, and I think that we're seeing that kind of take hold as maybe not necessarily the new standard, but definitely becoming more standard, more expected. How the logic of this world works, how the immersive the universe is, and the characters and their backstories. Those aspects that are obviously very key to a lot of Rare's legacy. And even Super Mario Odyssey, which is something we probably should talk about. I think Super Mario Odyssey is a pretty different shift in design practices for Mario games as of late. Something that's that article that you were talking about on what was the website the article came from?
It was
The Ringer.
The Ringer.
They mentioned that Super Mario Odyssey seems to be in the same way that Banjo-Kazooie obviously was taking inspiration from Super Mario 64. Mario Odyssey seems to have taken its inspiration from Banjo-Kazooie, and very different shift in a lot of the design practices. For instance, the fact that all of the challenges in the world are present for you to go and complete in one sitting. It's not, you don't get kicked out of the world like you did in Mario 64 and so many previous, Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario Galaxy, etc. And it doesn't present the world like a series of micro challenges. It's a world with challenges that you can kind of explore and discover and then tackle in your own order. So things are changing. Super Mario Odyssey is very different, and who's to say that they won't just go right back to something very classically Mario? But we, at least one major Mario game has come out to say, the Rare method, the Banjo method, even if it's not really a conscious, copying or a conscious inspiration, it's definitely in that cut out of that same cloth. And that these type of ideas are of value.
Talking about Super Mario Odyssey, and I'm obviously thinking about New Donk City, but it's every world in the game. But one of the things that like jumped out at me when I was playing Super Mario Odyssey for the first time at last year's E3 was how you could talk to all of these people in New Donk City, and different people had different problems, and it just felt to me a lot more like a living, breathing environment than I've ever seen in a Mario game, which, you know, it was our infamous criticism of the Mario series was the Mario series always feels like an obstacle course that's disguised as a world, but there's never any plausibility to it. Super Mario Odyssey completely shatters that and says, oh no, this is a living, breathing world that Mario's interacting with. Here you go. So, and, you know, Banjo-Kazooie was there, 20 years earlier. And I think, you know, you can say, I don't know if, you know, Banjo-Kazooie actually had any influence on Super Mario Odyssey. I would say it absolutely did. And that's great. You know, that it's great that finally Banjo-Kazooie is not this like closed evolutionary branch. It's actually honestly responsible for a lot of the resurgence in 3D platforming today. You know, you've got all of these Kickstarter games that have a debt to owe from Banjo-Kazooie. Of course, in our neck of the woods, you know, a lot of people think Hat in Time, but I'm going to say Ukulele, you know. But Ukulele, of course, is a lot more self-consciously styled after Banjo than any of them, but being, you know, who was developing it. But, you know, even like the non-Kickstarter games, the non-indie games like Super Mario Odyssey are obviously inspired by what Banjo-Kazooie did. And it's funny, we talk about how Nintendo is more invested in world building now than they ever were before. This is the same week we officially have it canonized that Donkey Kong Island, and therefore the entire Rare Archipelago, is definitively set in a different dimension than the Mushroom Kingdom.
I know, and there's still people who are not happy to hear that or not accepting of that, but what are you going to do? It's in a video game.
We won, baby, we won. Woo! I'm drinking champagne right now. Usually I drink an Angry Orchard, maybe some balls, maybe some Mountain Dew Baja Blast. I'm drinking straight up champagne today. This has been a good week as far as video game canon battles go. So yeah.
I'm kind of change gear a little bit here, and I had one thing I had been thinking about lately that I wanted to bring up is that obviously there's a lot of nostalgia right now coming, you know, brewing at the surface and starting to boil over for 3D platformers for late 90s. I think, you know, obviously nostalgia, sure. As time keeps moving forward, the things that are nostalgic keep that timeline also moves forward. And we're hitting that time where late 90s, N64, that kind of nostalgia is really influencing a lot of our products and games that are coming out and merchandise and all that stuff. And I think that Banjo-Kazooie is uniquely positioned to capitalize on that nostalgia in a way that nothing else within Nintendo, specifically within Nintendo, is. And the reason, I mean, obviously, if you step outside of Nintendo, there are other icons of that time period. You know, Rayman, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, lots of stuff. But within Nintendo-specific circles, the N64 era is defined mostly by getting three-dimensional reinventions of franchises that had been around for years. Super Mario 64, if you think of the name Mario, there's probably a pretty small chance that you're thinking of a 3D platformer. And if you think of the name Donkey Kong, is an even smaller chance. You know, there are people within Donkey Kong fandom that don't even think of anything Rare did when they hear the name Donkey Kong. There might be people who they really love the arcade game from all the way back in the 80s, and they pretty much just play retros games, the most recent major games.
Luckily, most of the arcade purists are getting revealed to be frauds with their high scores and whatnot. Talking to you, Billy Mitchell. Yeah. Talking to you. So as we ostracize them from the community, one by one, Rare will be king.
My point is that when you think specifically of that era of 3D platforming, that like first generation 3D platforming, Banjo-Kazooie is the mascot for that. They're the icons of that. They are the only thing within the Nintendo repertoire that are uniquely that. They didn't come from a 2D platforming route or anything else. They are almost only defined in their entire history as 3D platformers. And obviously
Sure.
they're brand new characters created for the 3D platforming genre. And so right from the ground up, the idea of the bear with the bird in his backpack, it was built with gameplay in mind to suit, the types of moves and physical things you could pull off using those characters in a 3D space. Kazooie using her wings to do stuff and all of the abilities they're based around. It was all built from the ground up. Like, hey, let's make a character that's going to work well to move around in our 3D space. And neither Donkey Kong nor Mario were built as characters with that idea in mind. And so I think that we're in a good position right now as this nostalgia becomes overwhelming, and that is going to translate into the types of game experiences that we're experiencing now. Banjo-Kazooie is the mascot of that whole generation. They're the mascot of that gameplay genre, that entire genre, and it's really heartwarming to see almost the entire gaming fandom, or gaming media, everybody come around, and there aren't really many people saying, "Oh yeah, Banjo, I hate that. I don't want more of that." Like this, like, "Oh, Banjo, what are you talking about? Give me Super Mario 64." That is not really a resounding call anymore. It's all like, "Oh, Banjo, boy, do I remember Banjo. That was such a solid, that's a good game. Big fan of Banjo. That's everybody. That's all people. Everyone can enjoy Banjo-Kazooie, and it's okay to openly declare you love Banjo-Kazooie, and you're going to get 10 other people in the room that agree."
Yeah. Yeah, it's my theory of any pop culture series or product. It's initially it comes out. If it's successful, it has the huge hype. It has probably 5 years under the sun where it's beloved, it's held up, it's got an active fan base. And then the backlash starts. And then you've got pretty much a decade where it's tough being a fan of a product. The true blue fans who've hung on, it's the worst time to be a fan. And then you've got the nostalgia kicking in, and you've got people who grew up with it entering the very industry that this thing was a part of, and then all of a sudden the perspective on it changes, sometimes gradually, but sometimes almost overnight. And that's where we are with Banjo-Kazooie. We have finally crossed that desert, that Gobi's Valley, where it just felt like being a Banjo-Kazooie fan, an avowed Banjo-Kazooie fan, was one of the hardest things in the world. I mean, that was one of the downsides to what we call the buyout era, when Rare was bought by Microsoft, because they very quickly hit that point of that kind of pop cultural, not so much backlash, maybe backlash is too strong of a word, but things kind of move on very quickly. And Rare's in a very good position now where they've got heavy nostalgia for all their products, sometimes detrimentally so when they're trying to develop a new IP like Sea of Thieves. But by and large, I think now Rare is in a better position than ever to make a Banjo-Kazooie game. So it's just kind of it's kind of funny just the way things work out, and having that perspective of being such a long tenured fan site, we've kind of seen this play out. And now here we are sitting at the 20th anniversary of Banjo-Kazooie, and honestly, Banjo-Kazooie hasn't been as hot as it is now since when it came out in the first place. So it just goes to show that good things happen to those who wait. So, well, we have quite a few calls to take, Jeff. And I wanted to reach out to our audience and see what Banjo-Kazooie means to them. And real quick, we also have some people in our live stream chat. We've got Godzilla Guy 92, aka Just Andre. We've got Banjo Kaboom, aka Andrew, I believe. Sorry, he goes by many handles on social media and whatnot. But We've got Dustin was in there. We got a lot of people actually tuned in right now. So give a quick shout out. If you have any thoughts you want to give, be sure to give them, and I'll try to read them off while we're taking all of these calls. All right, Jeff, are you ready?
I'm ready. I was born ready.
You were born ready. Okay, so you even before 6 years before you played Banjo-Kazooie, you were born ready to talk about it. And by talk about it, I mean listen to calls from callers of a podcast that would not exist for another 14 years or so.
I just think you can't really call yourself born until something like Banjo-Kazooie comes out into the world, you know? Were we really alive before that?
Right,
I don't think so.
Fair enough. All right, here's the first call.
Hey. Good. It's Brittle Nipples Kevin. It's been a while since I called. Let me say it again. Brittle Nipples Kevin is up in the conversation right now. Talking about Banjo-Kazooie Anniversary. Oh yeah. I remember playing a demo of it in a fucking Macy's. Yeah, I don't even understand how it was there. Like, thinking back out, like, it's a fucking Macy's. Why is it here? But I played it, and I fucking loved it. And then I ended up renting it from Hollywood Video and got up to fucking Clanker's Cavern and was just, like, scared shitless as this giant mechanical shark is just, like, fucking staring at me as I come out the shithole pipe. And, oh my god, Banjo-Kazooie, one of my favorite games ever. First game I ever 100%ed. Got all those fucking teases for Banjo-Tooie, like, oh, here's some fucking eggs and key. Oh yeah, and I spent hours trying to get through that fucking wall for that goddamn ice key. Oh, I don't even, just trying to fly through Warzy's cave and up and beak bomb it. No, it didn't fucking work because it's all a fucking joke. I fucking love that game. I can't wait for first four figures Banjo-Kazooie figurine to come out. It's going to be expensive as shit, I'm sure, but it's going to be awesome. And it's supposed to be announced sometime soon. I love this game. I love y'all. Peace.
And we love you, Brittle Nipples, Kevin. Brittle Nipples actually called in a second time, so let's get to that next call before we fully address the Brittle Nips.
Hey, motherfuckers. It's Brittle Nipples Kevin again. I got so excited on my last call that I forgot to talk about my favorite levels. Now, I can't decide. It's either Mad Monster Mansion or Click Clock Woods. They're both so fucking amazing. I love me some spoopy, Halloween-themed monster levels, but Click Clock Woods was just so fucking unique at the time. Like, it was like 4 levels in one. What the shit, Rare? Like, oh my god, god damn it, I gotta go play this game again. Fuck. For the longest time, I thought Nabnut was Conker. This is way before Conker's Bad Fur Day, of course. I don't know. I don't know about y'all, if y'all ever got confused. What was y'all's fucking favorite level? Fuck.
Fuck! Thanks for the calls, Brittle Nipples, Kevin.
You know, real quick, when he first said his name, I thought he said Brittle Nipples 7. And I thought, how could there possibly be 6 others? How is this that, you know, I thought I was weird that I was the 17th Panda Batman on Xbox Live, but no, yeah. Anyway, thanks for the call, Kevin.
Yes. So he brought up a few points. I was never confused about Nabnut being Conker, although I did appreciate that there was a squirrel in the game when I knew first Diddy Kong Racing introduced Conker and that there was going to be a Conker game coming. But it's amazing to me how many people don't realize that Naughty in Click Clock Wood is a Donkey Kong reference. I posted something about it on social media some time ago, and the amount of people who just said, I had no idea that was actually referencing Donkey Kong. I'm like, what? His name is Naughty! And yeah, but I wonder how many people never put it together that Tip Top in Bubble Gloop Swamp is the same Tip Top from Diddy Kong Racing. I mean obviously...
Is there any proof of that, though? I mean, they're just two turtles with the same name. Just like that Triceratops.
You think it's like a John Smith? Oh, okay. I see what you're doing there. In a lot of the supplementary material at the time, they specifically pointed out it was Tip Top from Diddy Kong Racing.
Fair enough.
So,
I mean, supplemental material is not really canon, but okay.
All right, Jeff. All right. You have to be the devil's advocate to the very end, don't you? My favorite world, Click Lockwood. Same.
I was actually gonna say Mad Monster Mansion is mine. So Kevin is kind of like a mix of us both.
So yeah, we're one brittle nipple for the equals 2, which he has, I assume, unless one's so brittle.
There's 5 other people in this hive mind that make up brittle nipple 7.
No, for me, Click Lock Wood is so perfect because, I espoused earlier how Banjo-Kazooie, like Spiral Mountain, speaks to me as somebody who, as he gets older, he realizes he really loves the nature that was basically in his backyard. Like, I had a fucking John Denver sing along with Mitchell Wolf and Mamechi at the end of the last Kongversation. Just like the whole like Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah Valley, that kind of thing. I love it, and that's kind of like my neutral place. That's where I'm at my most peace. And Click Clock Wood kind of is the perfect culmination of that. It is one of the best final worlds, I think, in video game history, because it felt like the game was legitimately building up to that, but it was such a realized idea, and it's cause and effect to an extreme degree, because you see one full year play out in this world, and you do get a little bit of the Super Mario 64, you get taken out of it just for the season shift. But I like how you could jump around. You had to like unlock the seasons, but they could then jump backward or forward in time, essentially. It's such a weird idea, and it's such an advanced idea for the time. But I just love the world and the environment of Click Clock Wood. You're in this forest, and the seasons change, and how will that translate into a 3D platforming world? Like that's so brilliant, and that speaks to so much of what I love. Like Hyle Russell, the non-gamer, the Hyle Russell, the person. And it really helps me almost appreciate every season. Like, yeah, Winter in Click Clock Wood is still my least favorite part of Click Clock Wood. Winter is still my least favorite season, but at least I can stop and appreciate the beauty of it at times.
Yeah,
so,
I think that those worlds like Click Clock Wood, or even Freeze Easy Peak, that have a really tall central structure you can climb, are always really impressive, because being able to get to a very tall height and then look around the world and pan is one of my favorite things to do in Banjo-Kazooie. And just, you can see all the little pieces, bits of life and stuff going on in different corners of the world when you're at such a height like that. So that's a great aspect of that level too. If I could change my answer from Mad Monster Mansion, I don't know if this answer is legit or unfair, but I actually would say my favorite world is Spiral Mountain. I know that maybe doesn't count, but in terms of being the tutorial world, I think it might be the best tutorial world in any video game.
Absolutely. I've already gone on weirdly about how much I love Spiral Mountain, so I'm not going to bore you anymore, but yeah, I agree. Best tutorial. It really sets the tone and the mood of the game, the humor of the game. It's so good. It's so good. And, like, I would think post Grunny, like, becoming a decapitated skull and post her leaving the lair, Spiral Mountain may be the environment I would most want to live in the Donkey Kong universe. I wouldn't necessarily want to have a vile witch living right above me, but after that, sure. when it's just like Cheeto living up there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, thank you for the call, Brittle Nipples Kevin. All right, let's hear what our next caller has to say.
Hey guys, this is Dustin calling in to talk about some Banjo-Kazooie and exactly what it means to me. So, Banjo-Kazooie and the Banjo series as a whole is probably my number one creative influence. Ever since I was a kid, I would draw from a bunch of Rare's games, DKC2, etc. But I feel like the Banjo series is the one that's had the biggest influence on the art I do, the stories I make. My favorite part is meeting all the characters, the funny, crazy, wacky dialogue, and going from place to place in the world. I always thought that was really cool, and those are still my big things, the things I most want to do with my creative works. The characters, the locations, it's just all so good. So that's why Banjo-Kazooie is still important to me. Happy 20th anniversary, Banjo-Kazooie. Hey, here's to another 20 years, am I right? Oh!
Yeah, I'm not really looking forward to the Banjo-Kazooie 40th anniversary, just because I'll be in my 50s. Oh, good lord. Thank you for the call, Dustin. And I'm glad you brought up the characters a little bit more, because I wanted to really speak to that just a bit, and I didn't really feel like we had the opportunity before. The brilliant thing about Banjo's world, to me, is that it does feel real. Greg Mayles wanted it to be immersive, and they pulled it off, like, expertly. It feels both real as just its own thing, but as also part of the larger Rare shared universe, the Rare Archipelago, the Donkey Kong universe, however you want to quantify or define that. Mayles said in that interview that we've been mentioning that everyone in Banjo-Kazooie essentially has something wrong with them. It's a slightly bent, self-effacing reality. As we always say, the Rare Archipelago is full of weirdos. Like, the only people who can ever, like, find it are weirdos and perverts and criminals and miscreants. And that's something that's always kind of been the case with the Greg Mayles team, or anybody, really, developing DKU games for Rare, and then Playtonic. Chris Seaver probably took that philosophy to the logical endpoint, the furthest extremes with Conker's Bad Fur Day, but it's been there since Donkey Kong Country. I was grabbing some screenshots from the original Donkey Kong Country, and it's just amazing the shit Cranky spews. Like, he basically just, like, says you're going to die. As Donkey and Diddy go there, like, I don't expect to see you again, meaning, yeah, you're going to die. And this is your loving relative. Like, there's just been this humor, this kind of sometimes droll, sometimes over the top, but this biting British humor in all of these games, and all these characters do fundamentally have either something wrong with them, or they're just weirdos to the up 10th degree. It's fantastic, and it's endearing, and it really makes me believe in this world, and the way these characters interact. And I think Banjo-Tooie really, like, expanded on that philosophy. Some would probably say to a hindrance, because it was a lot more of a focus in Tooie. And, we haven't done a Banjo-Tooie Spotlight yet, because I think we have been holding on to that for the inevitable 20th anniversary, which we'll do in Season 8 of the Kongversation. But, Banjo-Tooie, I think, is a game really, like, worthy of having a discussion by, to itself, because I think Banjo-Tooie expanded and evolved a lot of things from Banjo-Kazooie in both brilliant ways, sometimes ways that hurt it, but all in all, the Banjo series, just the amount of world building that's been there from the start is just
I feel like
fantastic.
We spent a lot of time talking about how much effort they put into to make this feel like a real world and an immersive world, and the world building that they've done, and those are all great things and necessary things to have us still be talking this in depth about a game 20 years later. But it's not just that they built a world and made it believable, but it's also the world that they built is a likable world. It's the characters they've created are likable characters. I feel like Banjo-Tooie obviously has a darker bent to it. It's a lot darker. But I feel like Banjo-Kazooie, even though it's a little off kilter, it definitely has an off kilter sort of bent nature to it. It's still a cheerful kind of place, and I'm happy to be there. I enjoy being in that world. It's not just that, wow, this feels like a real world, but it's like, this feels like a real world that also is a world I'd like to go to and characters I'd like to interact with. The scene of, I think it's in Banjo-Tooie, of Banjo-Kazooie, Bottles, and Mumbo Jumbo playing poker. It's like, yeah, I want to play poker with those people. I want to sit down and have a beer with those people. I want to hang out and get my ass chewed out by Kazooie and they're fun characters.
Jeff Onan, I want my ass chewed out by Kazooie.
I knew as that was leaving my lips that was going to be, you were going to throw that back out at me. And don't throw that. Leaving the lips thing back at me either.
I'm just thinking more about the out of context Twitter feed.
But it's the world building is great, but they built a very likable world, and so when Dustin says that it's a foundation of his creative works is to emulate that, I get that. I think it's very strong desire to want to emulate that.
You're right though. Like the poker scene in Banjo-Tooie always comes to mind as one of my favorites, just because I like that you can see like glimpses of how these characters live outside of their adventure. Yeah. You even see it in Banjo-Kazooie. They celebrate initially by having a barbecue, and then they go to the beach after they actually beat the game, and there's just this sense of, these are real characters that even when the game is turned off, they're going about their daily routines. Like, they have an existence in this world, and it makes me want to visit it. Banjo-Kazooie is the world of Banjo-Kazooie, more so than Tooie or the sequels. The world of Banjo-Kazooie is a fairy tale designed for kids who don't necessarily like fairy tales. I was never like a kid. I always felt like fairy tales were like pushed on me as a kid, because I was a kid, and I always kind of resented them. So, but I did like the fractured fairy tales, the ones that kind of took the piss out of them, and that's kind of what Banjo-Kazooie is. I always say like Donkey Kong Country is kind of an adventure serial, not adventure cereal like breakfast cereal, but an old cereal like Indiana Jones emulated, and Conker is like Western animation. Banjo-Kazooie is a fractured fairy tale, and the world, I think, especially as I entered adulthood, the world becomes weirdly more appealing to me as time moves on, and it's a world I would love to visit in real life. Like, get me Banjo VR-y. Like, I would love to strap on a headset and actually be in this world. That would be amazing. Whenever we get the inevitable foray of the DKU into VR, aside from like any HoloLens stuff like Young Conker, Banjo-Kazooie would be the game I think I would most want to see, now that I'm really thinking about it. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Anyway, thank you for the call, Dustin. And Zaxo XL is in the live stream as well. Now, welcome. They say they have a feeling of being good friends. And yes, I get that. Like, good friends who take the piss out of each other, but you never really sense... I don't know. This is for the Tooie discussion, because the thing, Bottles does die, and Kazooie is kind of like a colossal like asshole about it, but I still get the sense that they're friends. I don't know. Okay. Next call. We'll save that for the season 8 spotlight for Banjo-Kazooie. All right.
Well, hey guys, it's Banjo from Banjo-Kazooie. I don't know why this conversation is about why I'm still relevant. You guys should be talking about the new game that's going to be announced. I am still relevant, you know. Oh, gotta run. Looks like my raging fan spotted me.
Thank you, Banjo. Banjo sounds like he's been like inhaling balloons full of helium or something. Okay. I think the Banjo voice is fun for people to call in with because it's so easy to just do the affected Southern like Banjo. It's probably one of the easiest voices to do. Much more so than say Conker or Donkey Kong. Is like on the low end. It's the grovelly. Like, if you do the Grant Kirkhope, okay, but it can throw out your vocal cords if you do it too much. So, okay, yeah, you are still relevant, Banjo. You will have a new game one day. Like, I know there's been a lot of doom and gloom, and we'll save this for the end of the show, I think, really. But there's been a lot of doom and gloom among very, very like loyal Banjo fans, where Banjo is their jam. Banjo is the rare property that they love the most, and they just kind of feel disheartened because it has been a decade since Nuts and Bolts. It has been 18 years since Tui, 20 years since the original, and it just. When are they gonna get some good news? When are they gonna get something besides Banjo appearing in #IDARB? Yeah, I mean, I think your patience will eventually be rewarded. There's no way that this goodwill towards Banjo will go unheeded. It will be answered. You will get something. You just have to be a little bit more patient. Give it a little bit more time.
Just to put it out there, though, be patient. You're going to be rewarded probably, but the thing is also, don't get your hopes too high that Monday Rare is going to reveal a new game that is coming out in October. That's what I've seen posted online. Like, if there was a game coming in October, it's 4 months away. We would know about it.
Right.
If there's a game being made, if there's a game that's going to be made, I promise you that Rare did not plan the release of their game around an anniversary, which is an arbitrary set of 5-digit numbers or of 5 numbers.
There is a lot of like self-generated fan hype that the 20th anniversary was going to wield some sort of like incredible announcement of the next Banjo game. And grant, they got it from the XBLA games because there was that quip, there was that quote inserted, for the 20th anniversary in there, and and then there were all these like presumably fake like leaks and hoaxes. Oh, they're doing a Banjo remake, and this is this and this is that. Don't feed the beast. We all want it, but you're only setting yourself up for disappointment and bitterness when it doesn't happen.
Greg Males in that interview on The Ringer also did address the idea of revisiting the game, and he said, it's always on his mind, which is encouraging to know, but he would want to do something different with it. And I feel like that's the reason we haven't seen it yet, is that I really do think that if they just made Banjo 3E, just a new iteration on the concept, it would not be received all that well. I think even if it was really good, I think that the gaming media, the sales numbers, the critical reception, it would not receive that well to get a new game that looked just like Banjo-Kazooie. I think that Greg knows that, and I think that he would like to do the idea of a sequel justice. I think he really wants to go all out with it, do something new but obviously classic, something that can bring Banjo into 2018 and please all the fans, but obviously, also be recognized as something that's good on its own and new, not just something that is only good for people who played a 20-year-old game. So anyway, I don't think they're making it right now. I don't think it's coming out in October. So don't get too excited. But they're going to put out some awesome merchandise, plushes and t-shirts, cool stuff. And all you got to do is just keep up the dream. Just keeps it, it's Banjo's not going away. It's not dead.
No. Like I like I said, good things come to those who wait, and I think if we've learned anything from our time on DK Vine, it's that patience is rewarded. Keeping the embers, keeping the flame alive will wield eventually a warming fire for the fans. It's always darkest before the dawn. How many more platitudes do I need to give before you get what I'm trying to say?
I just got platitude bingo, so I think we're set.
Okay, good. Yeah. Basically, celebrate the series. Be a fan. Be open about it. Bring others into the fold. But don't get discouraged. And I think, like, we've passed the point in DK Vine where I don't know if we're ever going to be in the shallows again when it comes to we're never going to get anything. I think we've really, like, the Rare Renaissance has really reaped a lot of we have so much now to play, to celebrate. And yeah, I want a new Banjo. I would love a new Conker. I want a 3D Donkey Kong game announced. I want another 2D platformer Donkey Kong. But I'm also not, like, wringing my hands saying, we're never gonna get another 2D platformer Donkey Kong Country game because it's been so many years since Tropical Freeze was announced. It's happening. It's going to happen. Just, I know, like, we don't want to wait. Like, life is short. We want it now, but just hang in there. All right. Let's take the next call.
Hey guys, it's Banjo-Kaboom, aka, or just call me Andrew, whatever. But oh man, Banjo-Kazooie, greatest game of all time. Why does it still matter? Because it's amazing. I remember when I was a kid playing Banjo-Kazooie with my brother, doing all the little, like, local co-op mini games and all that, and having so much fun. But it took me until about 2012 to realize how much I truly loved this game. When I was a kid, I didn't really have that many friends, but I always had Banjo-Kazooie. The story, the gameplay, the characters, the world, it's all amazing. I could just pop the game in, go to Hellfire Peaks, jump into Boggy's Igloo, and have a wank whenever I wanted to watch the Bear Babes DVD. But seriously, I'm a moderator on the Banjo-Kazooie Discord, and it baffles me how young the people are that are still really into Banjo. There's someone on there who's just played the game last year, and they love it. There's another person, or quite a few people who are, like, in high school that are in love with the game, and it's just amazing. It has such a profound impact on the people who play the game, and it always stands out. It'll always stand out as one of the greatest games of all time. Also, did Banjo actually call in? That's crazy. See ya.
Thank you for the call. And, when I think of, like, the true blue Banjo fans, I think you come to mind because your just devotion to the franchise on social media and whatnot is just very, very, it's moving. I love seeing fans celebrate their fandom in a positive way. And I think that's what I would do differently about the early days of DK Vine is I don't think we always utilize our fandom in a positive fashion. It was a lot of teen angst in that fandom, and that's what I'm trying to do with it now. And it's so good to see it come from others like you. So
he brings up a cool point about young fans, new people getting into the game now or recently. And I think that a big part of that, when people ask for a Banjo remake, when are we going to get a Banjo remake? Well, we already have one. And the Banjo and Banjo-Kazooie Xbox Live Arcade remakes, which are also available as a part of Rare Replay, are the best versions of the game that are available.
They really are. Like, I do want the original N64 version readily available just for the sake of historical accuracy, but I have no qualms with the XBLA versions. I think they're fantastic. I think they both, like, have the magic of the N64 games, but they're widescreen. They're fully enhanced. They have stop and swap come on. They're great.
So yeah, those are definitely
I think
pulling
they
in
get
new
over-
gamers. I think
Yeah, absolutely. Because and that's the great thing about having Banjo-Kazooie on Xbox is that Xbox, especially the way like Phil Spencer is going about things, they want to keep games available perpetually. Like you can always play Banjo-Kazooie on Xbox. You can always have this game at your fingertips, and they're bringing more games back, backwards compatibility, and they never want to leave any games behind again or have really any substantial differences in the generation. Like, oh, we're in a new Xbox generation. Okay, well now you can't play all of this. They're trying to move away from that.
I bought Donkey Kong Country on the Wii, and then I bought Donkey Kong Country again on the Wii U. I had to pay for it both times. And now I have a Switch and I can't play Donkey Kong Country on it, and I don't know when or if I'll ever be able to. But Xbox is definitely taking care of us on that front.
I was thinking about the way Nintendo goes about these things when I was giving Phil Spencer the old handy there. But no, I want the original N64 versions of Kazooie and Tooie available, ideally on Nintendo.
You're probably going to have to wait for the N64 Classic or N64 Mini. We'll see how that pans out.
It would be a good time to do it, and given the broness, the chumminess between Nintendo and Microsoft on social media as of late with the Minecraft crossplay, anything's possible, more so than ever. I could say there is a good chance that Banjo will be on a Nintendo platform in the form of the original game again at some point within the foreseeable future. And I would have never thought that half a decade ago.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, a lot of stuff to look forward to, I think.
By the way, he also mentions in the live stream that his favorite world is Freezy Peak, I believe. So, quick shout out to Freezy Peak. Freezy Peak, I say Banjo-Kazooie is a summer game, and I always associate with summer, and that includes Freezy Peak, oddly enough. Like, I barely think of Freezy Peak at Christmas time, during the holidays, at winter. I always think of Freezy Peak as this weird, like, heat-induced, like, fantasy of that time of the year, but never part of that time of the year.
It's kind of weird. I think of Donkey Kong Country 3 also. I feel like a summer game. I want to play it in the summer. And it also has like an ice world with a snowman, and then like the merry cheat code that turns everything Christmas themed. I always play that in the summertime. I never play that in the wintertime. So it's kind of the same.
Yeah, Freezy Peak is probably the world I spent the bulk of the summer of '98 in after I beat the game, obviously with the ice key and trying to figure out if there's a mechanic to get in there organically, not like hacking the game or anything. So yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of fondness for Freezy Peak. The music going in there, just as much as like Click Clock Wood is my favorite, as much as I think of Spiral Mountain, I always think of Freezy Peak 2 as just like part of the whole complete experience and part of the joy of Banjo-Kazooie, just having those secrets out of reach. Yes, Stop and Swap was a bust in its original incarnation, but I'm still thankful it was there because I love the notion of giving gamers an extra incentive beyond the actual game to replay, to explore, to live and breathe that game world. And nowhere in the game was it more exemplified than Freezy Peak. Dustin, by the way, is also in the chat, and he says his favorite world is Treasure Trove Cove because he's a sucker for beaches and pirates. You don't say. Yeah, it's Treasure Trove Cove is, as far as like the beach environments in the Donkey Kong universe, it's honestly one of my least favorite, but that doesn't mean I don't like it. I love Treasure Trove Cove. It's just, in comparison to Donkey Kong Country 2 or Sea of Thieves, or it's less actualized than I would like. And it's interesting the way Greg Mayles explains how he designed or they designed the worlds. It was basically to hide the fact that they had to have you have a expansive view of the world, but the level of detail in the game would like pretty much cause it to crash. So they had to load the world in bit by bit as you went into it. So they had to hide the world as best as possible. So that's why Treasure Trove Cove went up. That's why Freeze's Peak and Click Clock Wood went up, because you couldn't have a full expansive view of the world without the game just completely crashing.
Yeah, anything
itself.
that you couldn't see on screen, then they didn't have to load it. So they kind of would hide it, and Treasure Trove Cove is laid out pretty expertly to facilitate that. And Greg also explains in that, he says it kind of has the added benefit of giving you a stronger feeling of exploration, because you can't see everything at once. You have to get around that corner to find out what's over there, which is awesome.
Right. Yeah. Real quick, Zaxo XL says that Treasure Trove Cove is emblematic of the game, though. I think, if you want to bring someone into Banjo-Kazooie, you show them Treasure Trove Cove. I would agree with that. I think Treasure Trove Cove is really... The second world is always vital to a game, because the first world you can really like, but the second world will really tell you, should I stick with this game or not? Is it going to get even better from this point on? So I think Treasure Trove Cove did its job and did it wonderfully. It introduced flying, and it brought about so much, so many concepts into the game. Mumbo's Mountain was so basic but fun, and Treasure Trove Cove basically blew the lid off the game. So yeah, I agree with that. Cameron Regal is also in the live stream chat. Hi, Cameron. He says he also has a soft spot for Rusty Bucket Bay. And it was the first world I saw of the game, and I immediately fell in love with the brand of real-world crumminess invades fantasy humor that Tui would bring to the forefront. Yeah, Rusty Bucket Bay is always the world I think everybody thinks of as the world that has their least replayability, because it's the world you want to play the least. But I love the environment of Rusty Bucket Bay. It's something that's really appealed to me, especially as I've gotten older, I think, and I can appreciate crumminess a little bit more. Yeah. I love all the worlds. Like Banjo-Kaboom says, let's be honest, I love everything DKU. And I kind of do, really. At least everything from the rare side of the DKU. I have very few gripes that are legitimate about it. So, all right. Let's take the next call. Why don't we? Shall we?
Hello, my name is Joshua Taylor. I apologize about some of the previous messages I left there. I messed up, but I wanted to call and share my thoughts on Banjo-Kazooie. I think this is a game that took what Super Mario 64 and games like it did back in '96 and did it even better. There's a ton of moves to learn, different ways to travel the world. You can fly, granted only in certain areas, but still give you a lot of freedom. The one thing that always got me with the series itself is the characters in the world. It's very self-aware, but it was very fun. It was bright, but it even made fun of itself at times. The music, of course, added to it a ton. I've always expected pretty great things out of Grant Kirkhope, and it's definitely one of his best, I think. I've actually got the soundtrack in my at my work right now to listen to when I get a chance. Also, along with a little banjo standing on my desk that came with a Diddy Kong racing car, I believe, but I have no clue what that is. But anyway, this series I started out with my dad 20 years ago, and it was another game that me and him could enjoy together, and it was just fun to explore around and find everything eventually. It is one that I was very disappointed to see leave Nintendo consoles back in the early 2000s. It's actually something that's pushed me to get a 360 eventually. Down the road I did, and an Xbox One actually possibly very soon, with Rare Replay being one of my first purchases. But yeah, so if there was any series I would like to see make a comeback, Granted, on any system at this point, it would be Banjo-Kazooie.
Well, thank you for the call, Joshua. And don't feel bad. For some reason, the DK Vine hotline gives every caller a trouble when they first call in. But you got it in, so thank you for the call. You mentioned the Banjo Diddy Kong Racing figure. And by Toy Biz, it was part of the Diddy Kong Racing line. They released Diddy, Whizpig, and Banjo. And, Jeff, I don't know if you've been paying, while we've been recording this, First Four Figures has officially announced, we knew this was coming because they did a teaser last year, but they officially have a new teaser for the Banjo-Kazooie figure that they're doing. Holy shit, this thing looks great. They're doing pre-orders for it starting it says this Friday 10 p.m. HKT. What is that time zone?
Hawaii time. I don't know.
Holy shit! Like, when can I pre-order this?
Oh,
Hong
yeah.
Kong
See,
time?
that makes sense.
What?
That makes a
Okay.
lot more sense than what I said.
Yeah, no, yours wasn't
Hawaii
even a
is
thing,
one of the
Jeff.
islands in Hawaii.
So-
I don't know what they name their time zones, but it's just a guess.
Yeah. God, that's gonna be expensive though, right?
It's
Like,
probably
I'm
somewhere
a little
between
nervous.
$1,000
Like,
and $1,000. It's gonna be in that range.
It's a
It's-
good bet.
I'd plan on
I
that
agree
if I was
with
in
your
the chat.
prediction.
I'd plan on that
Yeah.
number figure. Yeah, that looks amazing. Actually, really well done and very N64 styled. It seems to be kind of a realization of maybe even just the N64 era, like renders, like from like box arts and promo materials. Yeah, it looks awesome.
Yeah, I think going forward, that's going to be what Banjo-Kazooie look like, at least more so than their nuts and bolts makeovers, which I don't think anybody really likes or prefers. Like, it looks fine when you're actually playing the game and as part of the nuts and bolts world, but by itself,
I think
not really.
a couple tweaks, and you could take the nuts and bolts designs and make them really palatable. I think to please everybody. But you're right. I think that going forward, we're going to see a look that is very strongly inspired by or mirroring the N64 look.
Yeah. I think we got a taste of that with the new statues Rare had commissioned back when they rebranded as the Rare they are now back in 2015. The new Banjo and Kazooie, they look like they borrowed elements from Nuts and Bolts, but by and large they are their N64 versions.
So just to clarify, I think you read it is this Friday. It's actually this Friday, a week from today, July 6th.
A week from today.
July 6th at 10 p.m. Hong Kong time, which might be July 5th over here. So, someone should check that out and get the for sure's on that. But yeah.
Sure.
So it's not today. Don't freak out and start Googling it. But
I was freaking out. I actually already embezzled money out of our life savings.
Thanks, patrons,
to pay for this. No, this is exciting. Anyway, thank you for the call, Joshua. Sorry, we got distracted. You mentioned the figure, and I had to bring it up because Rare has this big merchandising announcement to make, but they couldn't make it this afternoon as planned because right when they were going to go live with it, they lost power in Twycross. So
yeah.
Which, yeah, of course, it sounds like something that would happen to me, honestly, so I can sympathize. But yeah, so at least we got something, right? Right, Banjo fans, at least we got something today. Anyway, Dustin in the live stream says he likes the nuts and bolts designs. I don't hate them. I've made my peace with the nuts and bolts designs. But if I'm being perfectly honest, I feel like the N64 designs are more timeless than nuts and bolts designs. I feel like the nuts and bolts designs were where design choices were heading back in 2008 or so. But I feel like there's something about the N64 conceptions, the renders, that will stand the test of time a little bit better, if that makes any sense. I'm not design oriented. I'm not an artist, so I am probably the wrong person to even have an opinion on that.
I'll just say, I actually really do like Kazooie's design and her way her feather plume is and everything in Nuts and Bolts.
Yeah,
I think Banjo.
It's Banjo.
I think really, if you just fixed his eyes, if you gave him big googly eyes instead of the kind of, he looks so suspicious with his eyes are so small and kind of like half closed all the time.
He looks like he's got the Irish fathead syndrome. And forgive me for anybody with Irish blood like listening to this, but it's like when you get older, your head seemingly gets fatter. It's like Alec Baldwin or Sean Hannity, both sides of the political spectrum there. But like their head gets fatter and their eyes get beadier, and it's like
he always looks like he's smelling something a little off. Like, what the hell is that smell? And he's kind of like suspiciously looking around the room, like, what's that smell?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, thank you for the call, Joshua. Woo! Anyway, so yeah, should we take the next call? I'm still thinking about that figure though. Like, I've derailed my train.
And the great thing about the figure is that like you said, Rare's announcements for today got delayed to Monday. But we're probably going to get some more cool stuff on that level of coolness on Monday. So look forward to it. I don't really know. I know there was a rumor recently or a leak, something posted on something about a Banjo plush. And we haven't seen what that looks like yet. So
I believe it's from the same company that's doing the Sea of Thieves plushes. So
yeah,
I think Rare has been making some. Well, they've been making some merchandise deals left and right that the general public isn't privy to, and I think it's about to unload on us. And it's supposed to be today, but I think we're going to get the full crux of it. On Monday.
I go into stores sometimes like GameStop and Hot Topic and stuff like that just to look around. I don't ever buy anything, and I don't really like the way that their culture has moved and like monetizing and merchandising all this stuff, and it seems really kind of pandery the way like a Hot Topic is set up, and now GameStop is kind of the same way. But I always view Rare's properties as being on the level with some of the stuff they've got in there. You go into like a Hot Topic and there's like, a bunch of 90s era stuff that is just merchandise all over the place. You've got, Rugrats and Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon and like DuckTales and who knows what else, all kinds of stuff. I really feel like Rare's properties should be on those shelves in all kinds of, any kind of hobby store like that.
It's crazy how little there's been, and it's about to be rectified. It is, but I just hope I can control myself, and I'm not going to go on a shopping spree when I have other things I need to.
Well,
purchase.
hopefully, all of their merchandise isn't tied to exclusive Sea of Thieves cosmetics, because I will go bankrupt.
Yeah, that's where I will go wrong, especially if it's a leaky bucket. Leaky. Oh my god. Because we are campaigning now to get Leaky the Bucket as one of the pails, the buckets that you use to get the water out of your ship, and also you can catch your vomit in Sea of Thieves, because it's such a perfect fit. I could see like Leaky being an exclusive with some item, and I would buy that, like, I think that sight unseen, whatever comes with Leaky.
If Leaky is in Sea of Thieves, they should change his name, because it's a prequel, all right? And they should call the character explicitly. His name should be not Leaky the Bucket. Hi guys, my name's not Leaky. And then at some point in his future, he gets a leak in him, and he changes his name legally. He drops the not.
Right. It could just be like a name he was like given, and or maybe he's named Leaky because he fixes leaks in the ship.
So that actually would still make sense. And then it just was like karmic, like justice. It's like some sort of cosmic irony that the guy named Leaky eventually gets a leak. I used to fix these leaks, and now I'm, that kind of deal. Anyway,
but it's the same principle as like TT possibly being in Sea of Thieves that we love. Like, oh, this character that he's actually centuries old, and he was used by pirates.
Right. I mean, that'd be great.
I love it. All right,
we got what, like one more call?
Yeah. We got one more call to take, and then we'll wrap this up with our final thoughts, but we won't wrap up the nostalgia because there's going to be Banjo-Kazooie discussion all summer long on the Kongversation. We'll be doing episodes, character witnesses, we'll be doing some other stuff, some prizes, I'm sure. It's going to be a good summer for Banjo fans here on DK Vine, here on the Kongversation. So, last call, but not the last conversation about Banjo-Kazooie.
Hey there, Hyle and Jeff. It's Malik calling in, and I'm just here to give my thoughts on Banjo-Kazooie and what it means to me. I gotta say, I love Banjo-Kazooie because it's just a blast from beginning to end, and it's something that anyone can enjoy, young or old, and it's just timeless. I first played it in 2011 after I played Banjo-Tooie, and I could just not stop grinning by the end of it all. The colors, the music, the story, the humor, it all struck a chord with me, and I fell in love with it. And since then, I play through it at least once a year. I also introduced my younger cousin to it a couple years back, and he loves it just as much as I do, too. I played it again last month after Ukulele came around, and I still say that Banjo is just the better game. Even though we did get a good platformer in the vein of Banjo, I still wait with bated breath every E3 for the hope we'll see Banjo make a comeback in the platform scene or Smash Bros. Or whatever. It's a series that I just want to see more of, one that deserves another great platformer. Everyone talks about it, but nothing comes out of it, which speaks volumes on how popular Banjo still is despite his hibernation. Banjo's just awesome, man, and it's rightfully one of my favorite games ever. And maybe we'll see something later today. I mean, Rare did say something about a grand unveiling, but who knows? Yeah, well, those are my thoughts on Banjo, and that's all I got for you this time. Talk to you later.
Malik! Thank you for the call, Malik. Yeah, well... we're not going to see anything later today, because obviously Rare had a power outage, but, we'll know by the time the next conversation rolls around, and, apparently Banjo-Kazooie is going to be mentioned in a loot crate, or not mentioned, going to be included in a loot crate, the next loot crate, which I hate loot crate. Can I just say how much I hate loot crate, personally? I hate loot crate, but the upshot to that is anything that will be available in a loot crate will probably later be available separately, like the Captain Flameheart figure was in the Sea of Thieves related loot crate. So, but we don't know what's going to be in the loot crate, but it's going to be something Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah. We'll get more information on Monday. I know that this week's weekly developer update for Sea of Thieves had Drew Stevens give us a little info that that next week's patch for Sea of Thieves, which usually come out around Tuesday, will include a nod or some form of content to as a gift to us to commemorate Banjo's birthday. So presumably that'll be like a figurehead or something along those lines, some sort of ship cosmetic or Leaky!
There's still time, you bastards! Leaky!
And obviously, there'll be t-shirts and other types of merch, so I'm excited. I'm probably not going to buy a loot crate, but like you said, that might become available later separately.
Well, yeah, Banjo-Kazooie is in the same loot crate with like Mass Effect and
Super Mario,
like
Altered Beast.
Yeah,
like I don't need an Altered Beast piece of merch.
Yeah. No, that's why. This is why I hate Loot Crate, because I have such particular interest. I am not a general nerd culture kind of guy. So I'm not going to be happy with just nerd shit thrown at my mailbox every month.
Well,
sight unseen. Like, yeah, Banjo-Kazooie and Loot Crate, that's awesome. But I just want a Banjo-Kazooie Loot Crate. If you could give me a Banjo-Kazooie Loot Crate every month, I would subscribe to Loot Crate. But I don't want fucking Mass Effect merchandise in my house. I have no need for that.
Even DKU related merchandise, I have like a limit with, where I start to look around my room and like, I'm like, I didn't really need that thing that I spent $14 on, or whatever. And I'm like, man, I got a lot of stuff, and sometimes as a human adult, sometimes you have to move and you have to you have like all this stuff. You have to think like, is it worth it? Do I need this stuff? And Loot Crate is like, here is some stuff. You don't even know what it is, and you might not care about most of it, but you're going to have it. That's not me. If you like it, that's cool, though, and I'm happy for those who are interested in all that Loot Crate has to offer. But for my specific tastes, I don't really want Mass Effect merchandise taking up shelf space here. But yeah.
Yeah, this is my office. The DK Vine office here is basically a museum at this point to the Donkey Kong universe, but I also have to use it as a workspace. So it is like, space is becoming, especially when Sea of Thieves came out and they just released this glut of Sea of Thieves merchandise, which I wasn't like prepared for mentally, because that's never been a thing with any Rare game. So all of a sudden I have all this Sea of Thieves merchandise. I kind of went like a little hog wild, and then I was like, well, I'm running out of room. Shit. And now they have Banjo stuff coming. Shit. And Conquer stuff coming.
Cameron Regal in the chat mentions that Conquer was featured in a Loot Crate, and it was a Bad Fur Day t-shirt. And that t-shirt is now available separately in the vault, which I guess is like a Loot Crate store of individual items from previous Loot Crates. So, yeah, there you go. The Banjo stuff is probably going to be available also in such a vault. Unless it's not, in which case, don't blame me. I'm just speculating.
He's just speculating. Don't blame Jeff, people. Don't blame Jeff. It's a pretty sweet Conquer shirt, though. I don't know if I would wear it, because it's just the characters, and I kind of like more understated shirts that celebrate my gaming fandom, like the fan gamer style of like, let's just kind of be evocative of something, but not really like just plaster the character on there. But still cool. All right. Anyway, Jeff. Wait, was Malik's call all about Loot Crate? I don't really remember what Malik's call was about. We got on a Loot Crate
He kind of mentioned Banjo-Kazooie.
Oh, Banjo-Kazooie, that's right. That's right. That's what we were talking about. Banjo-Kazooie, Jeff. So here we are, the 20th anniversary, 20 years. Oh my God. Where does the time go?
I'm barely 20 years. I'm barely 20 years. I'm like... I was a baby. I was like a young child when Banjo-Kazooie came out.
I know you're not 20, Jeff. The amount you drink,
I'm almost
you're not
25.
20. Okay.
So anyway, my point is that to think about the 20th anniversary of a video game, it's so like, it's a big number to me. I know to you in your wisdomed years, the number 20 is but a tiny number. You've experienced probably multiple 20s.
It's but a drop in the
exactly.
league.
But 20 years since Banjo-Kazooie, it's like almost 20 years since my entire life. That's a long time to be obsessed with one video game.
Here's some perspective. So in Donkey Kong Country, Cranky Kong was the original Donkey Kong, and he was portrayed as this elderly, like washed up, like ancient relic. When you look at the time between Donkey Kong, the arcade game, and Donkey Kong Country, it was what? Like 12 years?
Yeah. Well, did you know...
like 13
did you know
years,
that we
maybe?
are closer chronologically to the time of the T-Rex than the T-Rex was to the time of the Stegosaurus?
Did you know, chronologically, we are closer to the time of the T-Rex transformation in Banjo-Tooie?
I was hoping you could make that relevant, but I also wanted to make it a challenge for you. So It's not
It
much of a
wasn't that much of a
challenge. No, I
challenge,
got to
yeah,
step up my
sorry.
game. It speaks to Banjo-Kazooie's enduring legacy. That's really what we've focused on in this episode, is the legacy. The fact that we're even discussing it, and it's 20 years later, is really an achievement in and of itself, because I remember 1998, and there were like a bunch of video games. I think there was several dozen video games that existed, maybe more, that came out.
1998 was a huge year for gaming.
Right. I mean, Ocarina. Right.
Like, Ocarina
we
of
both said
Time
Ocarina.
came out. Yeah.
There were so many games that came out in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s. So many games, even just in the platforming genre. And they haven't all stood the test of time. They haven't all created a fan following that endures to this day. And Banjo-Kazooie is up there among the best in terms of the following, in terms of the influence and the fact that so many people turned up to call in on this episode and show up in the live stream. All of us have been touched by this game, and it's really an amazing thing for one of the many video games that came out in the late 90s to have such a legacy.
Yeah. We here at DK Vine, we consider Banjo-Kazooie to be a spin-off of the Donkey Kong Country series. And, in many ways it was. But I think, looking at the fandom, Banjo-Kazooie has just as much of a vibrant community of fans obsessed with that property as Donkey Kong does. And maybe even in some sectors, it eclipses the fandom for Donkey Kong. And it's potent. It's one of Microsoft's most potent IPs that they actually own. There's this famous meme kind of image where, they show what the IPs would be if everybody did their own Smash Brothers game. So you got Smash Brothers, then you got a Sony version of Smash Brothers with all those IPs, and then they had Microsoft, and they just had Master Chief there. And I look at that, and I'm like, that's way off base. They've got Rare, they've got Banjo. Banjo alone is a huge IP that I think is more valuable now than it may have been back in 2002 when they bought Rare. And look, Microsoft knows that. Phil Spencer knows that. Xbox knows that. And I think that's why when I say, like, just be a little, just hang on, guys. I think that's why. They've espoused that realization many times. I think we're going to be getting something new from the Banjo series sooner rather than later. We don't have to look back to the time of the T-Rex for comparison's sake. I think it will be within the next, I would say 3 years. I'm making a prediction. Within the next 3 years, Banjo fandom's patience will be rewarded. And I have that's not like, oh, I have insider knowledge. I don't. This is just me, as we like to say, reading the tea leaves. How about reading the honeycombs? We're reading the honeycombs and saying, you know what? This will pay off. Somebody will develop a new Banjo game before too long because the demand is just too high. They know what they've got. They wouldn't be making merchandising deals for Banjo if they didn't know what they've got. So just hang on. Jeff, do you have anything you want to add to this? I just gave a rousing speech to rally the troops.
If I were to say anything following such a great speech, I would stomp Onan on all of your momentum. Stomp Onan is a character off of Banjo-Tooie, I think. There you go.
That's a little dippy, Jeff.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.